How do you do storytelling? How do you retell a story in your own words? Through stories, we share patience, fears, sadness, hardships, and joys, and we find common ground with other people so that we can connect and communicate with them. Stories are universal, conveying meaning and purpose that help us understand ourselves better and find commonality with others. The story has five basic but important elements. These five components are the characters, the setting, the plot, the conflict, and the resolution. What tense is used in storytelling? You can use either present or past tense for telling your stories. The present tense is often associated with literary fiction, short stories, students in writing programs and workshops, and first novels. You can mix the past and present tense in the way you seem to be doing. People do it all the time. Generally, in the sort of narrative, you use the past tense for actions completed, things that are already over, and the present tense for things that continue to be in progress and generally true at the time of writing. Traditional stories often start off with the phrase once upon a time. However, if you're going to tell your story after someone else, you already know him, you can say something like that reminds me like this story. Funny, you should say that. Did I ever tell you the story about? Hearing your story reminds me of when I was a little girl and something similar happened to me like this. You can begin your story by using these phrases. How do you sequence a story? Sequencing refers to the components of a story, the beginning, middle, and the end, and also the ability to retell the events. And how we can arrange the events in the story. To find a sequence of events, you should think about what happens in the beginning, middle, and the end of the story. Here I'll tell you some transition words and phrases that will use to show a sequence or events or ideas. First, to begin a story, we can use these words or phrases. First of all, once upon a time, one day, first, firstly, to begin with, to start off with the story. When we are sequencing the middle of the story, we can use these phrases or words. Soon, meanwhile, then, after that, later, after a while, next, second, third, secondly, thirdly, and furthermore, further, moreover, another, in addition, also, subsequently, after, before. When you're trying to reveal a surprise or a secret or a mystery in the story, it's going to be unexpectedly happened in the story. You can use these phrases or words. Suddenly, all of a sudden, but then. When you're in the end of the story, you're trying to conclude your story, you can use these sentences or phrases, this kind of transition words. Finally, at last, in conclusion, to summarize, at the end, afterward, in the end, lastly, after all, by the end, by this point, eventually. Let's enjoy reading this story of a lion and a mouse. Once upon a time, a lion was sleeping in a forest. A mouse started playing on it. The lion was disturbed and aroused from his sleep, and it caught up the mouse angrily and tried to crush it to death. Then the mouse prayed the lion to leave him off, and assured that it would help him when it needed. Then the lion laughed at it and let him off. Finally, one day the lion was walking in the forest. The lion was caught in a net spread by a hunter. It roared and tried to escape, but in vain. The mouse heard the lion's roaring and came there. It started cutting the net with its teeth, and then the lion escaped and thanked the mouse. How do you write the moral of the story? The moral of the story usually revolves around the story's theme. The theme is the element of the story which carries the central idea, motive, or belief in a story. What's the moral in this story? The lion and the mouse. The moral of the story is everything has its own value. Thus, the moral has been revolving around the theme of the story. Telling stories is common in any language. Think of all the situations in which you might tell a story in your everyday life. You can talking about last weekend to a friend, giving detail about something that had happened during a job interview, relating information about your family to your children, telling colleagues about what happened on a business trip. In each of these situations and many others, you provide information about something that had happened in the past. To help your audience understand your stories, you need to link this information from the past together. One of the most important ways to link ideas is to sequence them. For example, passage. Last week I visited Chicago to attend a business conference. While I was there, I decided to visit the Art Institute of Chicago. To start off, my flight was delayed. Next, the airline lost my luggage, so I had to wait for 2 hours at the airport while they tracked it down. Unexpectedly, the luggage had been set aside and forgotten. As soon as they found my luggage, I found a taxi and rode into town. During the ride into town, the driver told me about his last visit to the Art Institute. After I had arrived safely, everything began to go smoothly. The business conference was very interesting and I thoroughly enjoyed my visit to the institute. Finally, I caught my flight back to Seattle. Luckily, everything went smoothly. I arrived home just in time to kiss my daughter goodnight. To begin your story, create the beginning of your story with these phrases. Use a comma after the introductory phrase. First of all, to start off with, initially, to begin with. For to continuing your story, you can continue the story with the following expressions or use a time class begin with a as soon as or after. When using a time class, use a past simple after the time expressions such as then, after that, next, as soon as, and but then, immediately. I'll tell you some examples for the continuing phrases. Then I started to get worried. After that, we know that there would be no problem. Next, we decided on our strategy. As soon as we arrived, we unpacked our bags. We were sure everything was ready. But then we discovered some unexpected problems. Immediately, I telephoned my friend Tom. You can use the following expressions to add suspense to the story. Suddenly, unexpectedly. Mark the end of your story with these introductory phrases. Finally, in the end, eventually.